Hey, welcome back, Visions fans. It's Ready Player Will here with another character review. Today we're doing Winter Viktora, who's a newly released unit, alongside Winter Venera last week. I won't say she's incredibly unique or special in that there's not, a lot of theory crafting to do around her. She's fairly straightforward in what she wants to do, and she does it very well. I like her as a character overall, to be honest. I think she's just going to be a lot of fun to play with. So jumping into it, she's a brand new water unit, kind of helps round out the variety of the cast that already exists there. From a job perspective, sniper, dual gunner, and paladin. When I first looked at her, seeing obviously sniper and a gunner sub job, I'm thinking to Nivlu like, oh, it seems kind of repetitive and redundant. It's really not, though, and for reasons we'll get into soon, the key differences between the gunner jobs there, and then her paladin job is also very different in terms of what she does compared to what Nivlu wants to do. So the weapon overall, though, she's a bow user with hat, cloth, and accessory with a move of 3 and a jump of 2. That jump in particular I love, obviously to help traverse the map quicker and get over hurdles if need be, but also because she's a bow user, that elevation is to her advantage, that getting high ground quickly helps the trajectory of her shots and the range overall. So big plus on that from a movement perspective. In terms of resistances, this is one of the things that I really like about her. She's really only materially weak to strike damage. I don't consider this magic weakness potent enough to really be afraid of. Which I love, because that means that when you go into a fight, there's just one niche kind of damage that can really hurt her. But other than that, she's going to be fairly competitive with what she's receiving for damage overall. From a stats overview, she is above average accurate, about 6% so, nothing too crazy, but her luck just slightly above average, and the dexterity fair bit above average, and that's going to help her because dexterity also helps the critical hit rate, which is really a great thing to have in someone's kit to be able to have some burst damage and kill targets quicker. The evasion side of things, that luck stat helps, but the 61 agility also fairly strong, above average as well. And she's, what is that, 7, 8, 9 points above the average evasion, so I wouldn't call her an evade unit 100%. She does have an ability on the dual gunner, which smokescreen, which is able to boost her evasion by 30%, which is very significant, and will obviously help her dodge a handful of attacks, but I don't think she would dodge with the consistency that you would hope in a normal dodge unit, but it's there and it helps, it certainly does. She innately has 4 defense, every little bit helps, but the other thing I wanted to point out is she can innately, or not innately, but she can hit 100 defense penetration, which is insane. It's the first time in the game that I know of that's possible. There might be other instances, but this is the first time it smacks you in the face as a parent. Her tune-up passive ability gives her 40. Her target active ability gives her 40, and the new Platinum Bow gives her 20. What that means, for those of you that aren't aware of defensive penetration, it's essentially a percent of which you essentially ignore the enemy defense. So if you're running 20% defense penetration, that means you'll ignore 20% of the enemy defense stat. 100 means you ignore all of it. That's the fucking insane thing. So that helps her tank bust pretty significantly and really pack a punch, more so than some of the other missile users are potentially capable of. The stat differences from Nivlu, as I mentioned, I wanted to really break them apart here. Nivlu is technically higher luck, more dexterity, which makes her more accurate, more chance to proc critical hits, but evasion-wise, Nivlu, the same thing. She's way faster, 10 more agility, for an overall more evasive unit, but comparing all the stats, and Viktora has the edge there with an extra 300, for some survivability. The attack is way harder hitting, she's looking 50 or 60 higher, and Nivlu, all in all, is a speedier, dodgier, utility-driven DPS via the Time Age sub-job. And I say utility because, it's more non-quantitative and influences on the team fight, whereas Viktora's a harder-hitting, tankier DPS. She basically just shoots things and they die. That's her in a nutshell, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. From the class and job overview perspective, so tune-up I think is almost a must-have on her. This increase in agility obviously is going to help her get more turns in the rotation. It's going to help her evade if you're trying to build her toward that. The defense penetration is going to help her hit a lot harder on a handful of units. But other than that, you can really take your pick whether you want to go for that longer range. There is an ability that gives her extra range, so you may not necessarily need this unless you truly want her to be a pure sniper. But sniper mastery, obviously luck helps, evasion and accuracy, and then the missile attack is nice, and Holy Knight's protection, also a good one to help make her even sustain and tankier than she already can be with some of her paladin abilities. from a counter perspective, I love counter smoke all in all. To me, one of the best things you can do is, one of the reasons why I emphasize the stats at the beginning of this, accuracy is a supremely underrated stat in this game, where if you're not hitting your opponent, you're doing no damage. So you don't have to heal that, you don't have to mitigate it, you don't have to block it, you don't have to defend it. If they miss you, then it's 0. So to me, abilities that can help take away turns or help people miss are supremely powerful in this game, just because it's almost universal that you don't need to strategically build for it. You can just make them blind and they're going to miss you. So I like that a lot, but obviously Predictive Fire is situational, and Paladin's Guard is good too, just for taking less damage overall. But again, you don't need Paladin's Guard if you're going to reduce their accuracy and they're going to miss. You know what I mean? Anyways, moving on to the Sniper. All of these abilities, I think this is such a cool class. I love the decreased agility 3 turns per target. Like, that's such a game-changing thing by being able to change turn order potentially. Target is supremely powerful by the increase of range and the defensive penetration. Dispel Spread is fantastic. Not only just to dispel buffs and haste, but to be able to dispel hate on tanks, where if someone's Taunting Blade or Warrior Lights using the passive to buff his hate, this will just negate it, which completely turns the team fight on its head. Slow Arrow is okay to decrease move, but on the priority list, probably more toward the bottom. I usually have it disabled. And then Barrier Break Arrow is absolutely fantastic, where if you're talking about being a tank buster, Barrier Break Arrow is a critical part of that, where you can not only eat through defense, but you can bust through some of those shields they put up. A little fun little tidbit, Lastwell's Mirage actually counts as a shield, so as a barrier, so she can also break that too. The sub job is not bad. It's probably not as good as the other two. Disable's a powerful ability. There's an attack buff here, but you don't get full utility because you don't need the killer. And Paralyzing Trap is not bad, because again, if your people are paralyzed and they're not attacking, that means there's 0 damage, so that's cool. It's just the other two probably fit her role a little more complementary. The Dual Gunner job, where that comes in specifically different from the Gunner, basic Gunner job. Gunner regularly has attacks that are a bit more in range, little cheaper, lower modifier with a little bit more in the way of status effects. Whereas Dual Gunner here, it does have range, but it is not as far-reaching and a little more centric on the AoE, as well as higher modifiers. Like Dual Trigger is just absolutely fantastic here. Horizontal Shot, super potent. And Smokescreen is a very powerful ability. This is the one that increases that evasion rate by 30%, while also buffing her defense by 20. So again, kind of helping that survivability overall, where you're going to kind of come into a identity crisis is if you're going to want to put her on the Paladin job. To me, the only two that you would ever really run here are Saintly Wall at the bottom, which reduces the physical damage 3 times for target, not 3 turns, 3 times, which is a important difference. Sentinel, also really great, not only for the defensive buff, but the SPR buff. We haven't talked at all about like SPR in her kit. If you're going against some magic users, this will help. So, you're really deciding Paladin is probably a little more reliable in how it mitigates damage, and that Saintly Wall doesn't expire. It just lasts there for 3 times. Sentinel obviously buffs the defense and SPR a little bit more, but you're essentially trading off that more consistent defensive prowess to more offensive capabilities here. And, Smokescreen does offer some protection via evade and defense as well. So just a preference there depending on what you're going against. In terms of the limit break, I love it. It's a little bit more costly than average to your DPS, but it is a double hit ability, which is awesome for chaining. The range, I love just being a small AoE there. The chance to blind, it's actually pretty much a guaranteed blind, which is amazing. Again, if they can't hit you, it's 0 damage. I love it, while also reducing hate for herself, which is a fantastic part of her kit. The TMR here, I'm actually a huge fan of, because not only does it boast strong stats for an accessory, over 300 HP, 10 defense, 12 accuracy, but this TMR skill, this is one of those TMRs that I'm going to really have to play with, that when you go into a battle and you see an enemy comp, this is specifically for like Arena and Guild Wars. In your mind, you're like, yeah, this comp, I can take this comp. I know what they're going to do. I reliably know what the first couple turns look like. But if you put this TMR on your team and all of a sudden, your Engelbert is climbing mountains, like that's going to screw up not only the AI of the other team from what you're used to seeing, but the other person isn't going to really be prepared for this increase in mobility. So all of a sudden, characters are going to be moving to parts of the map on turns that they wouldn't normally do. So I really like it just for that sake that you can actually throw a genuine wrench into how things normally operate. Obviously, I can see a lot of benefit if you can manually control this in some future content where, helps your team scale heights quicker. But yeah, really interesting TMR from a utility standpoint. For the vision card, oh, and before I forget, the decrease in AP consumption, huge part of the master ability, where all of her AP abilities cost 20% less than what they're listed as. That's fantastic, and the reason why I say that is because I love new test subjects on her as a vision card. Not only does it have the increased acquired AP, so it costs less, but she gains more, which means there's less, necessity to put like Ziza bells on her, which she can actively generate enough AP on her own. But the extra dexterity here is huge for that accuracy and critical damage chance. And then overall, just the party effect. Missile attack is very potent for her and her sniper buddies, and attack resist is a very powerful way to defend against attacks too. Frederica's Dream, not a bad alternative. I just think objectively it's probably a smidge worse because you don't get into the unit effect, but the missile attack technically is stronger. But overall, I like test subjects better just for what it brings. Realm Reaver Oven, that's just a gimme for all DPS. I think all of them really benefit from the killer and the HP and the increased attack resist as a type of defensive mitigation. And Mask of Deceit, obviously a little more geared toward if you're facing other gunner comps, but just in general, I love this card for the fact that it adds both dexterity and luck, which helps all those stats that we talked about at the beginning. It still has the increase of human killer of 10%, which is what Odin has, and the increase of missile resist of 20% for party is powerful for a lot of those missile comp duels where it comes in very handy. So I like that card a lot for just a handful of those reasons. In terms of Esper synergies, so for gunners, it's really like two primary Espers, Tetrasylphid and Chocobo. Now, Tetrasylphid is definitely more for the evader of missile units because she's got the evasion of 15. Also buffs missile attack, which is nice. But Chocobo here, it does have a missile attack up, but it also has increased attack by 15%. They are relatively the same agility, 16 and 15. So to me, like if you're going for that evadier dual gunner job, you're probably going to want Tetra on her to help with the evasion. But if you're going more for the paladin, like smack him, punch him in the face, style, Chocobo is probably better because it's going to buff the attack by a fair amount there, while also increase, slash resist and missile attack as well. So love those two. Odin is great, obviously, super high agility. Human killer helps the damage output. Two types of resist with slash and missile, which is very helpful. And Leviathan, it exists, but I'm not a fan of a VC an Esper like this, because to me, any Esper that has a low amount of agility needs to have like a really strong board to offset it. So to me, someone like Golem, I think, is a great example. He's a slow Esper, but the amount of defense that he brings, in addition to some of the potential human killer or pierce resist, is really powerful. But for Leviathan, only having 13 agility, the increase of water attack is very potent, but other than that, the rest of the board is kind of lackluster. It's got pierce resist, but she's already, 15% resistant to pierce, or 10% already, so she doesn't really like need it. It helps if you're targeting that team, but the rest of the board is rather lackluster. So Leviathan, it's okay, but not my first choice. For the equipment synergy, so two new bows here. One new bow, Platinum Bow, which boasts defense penetration of 20, which is amazing. A lot of high attack stats here. The crit build I like a lot. And Killer Bow is comparable. It's a little more potent in the critical build, and unfortunately gets bested by the attack stat. Platinum Bow overall is stronger. But the Killer Bow does have a penalty to evade of 5. So again, if you're running that evade style on her, you're probably not going to want the Killer Bow, probably want the Plat Bow. The difference between the two benefits, though, missile attack and defensive penetration, really comes into the nitty-gritty of how the equation works. But in general, defense penetration is superior against high defensive units, or on skills if your character is using skills that have very large modifiers on them already. And I'll elaborate on that. So, obviously, defense penetration, if you're attacking someone who's got 10 defense, it's only going to take away 2 of the 10, so not that strong. But if someone's running 60 defense and you can take off 20% of that, more significant, so you get more upside with the Platinum Bow in that instance. The same thing in terms of the modifiers. What I mean by that is, let's take a look at something like Rapid Fire here. This number is the modifier, 121%, or 1.21 if you're doing the math equation. And so if you have missile attack up of 15, and you add 15, a 121, that 15 has a lot more impact on the 121 in terms of as a percentage of boosting it up. If you're using dual trigger, which is 205, adding 15 to this is a smaller proportion of it, where it's obviously still going to make it hit harder, but it doesn't impact it by the same percentage increase, if you know what I mean, in terms of relative strength. So from that perspective, that's why a lot of people like the missile attack up on gunners, because gunners tend to have lower modifier attacks and don't always have very high attack stats. So you need to have strong modifiers to really buff that damage up. That being said, Viktora does have a high attack stat, and she does have some attacks that hit very hard on the dual gunner subjob, so defense penetration might be the way to go. Totally situational for what you're going against and what you feel like doing. Both have their place. So yeah, that's her in a nutshell. I like the unit. For those of you that have pulled for, I'd love to hear how your experience is going so far. And as usual, feel free, any corrections, comments, critiques, anything I can do to make these reviews better for you, or if you think I'm wrong about something, I'd love to be able to discuss it in the comments, because I'm obviously not the master of anything here. This is just my experience and analytics. So at the very least, I hope you've enjoyed the review. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to doing more of these for you. We have some really great content coming out in War of the Visions over the next couple months, so stay tuned. Take care, everybody.